Hello, thanks for joining us. Today we're joined by Graham Hoare, who is the founder and CEO of A Guy I Know. Thanks for joining us today, Graham. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about A Guy I Know.
Thank you for having me. So a bit about myself. Well, professionally, I've worked in the learning industry for about 16 years now, I think it is. I started off running a learning department, and that allowed me to understand the challenges from a business perspective that organizations face. And then the company I worked for ended up being made going belly up. So it's, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So I had to roll up my sleeves, discover what skills I didn't have in the learning. And that's when I kind of trained myself on all the things my staff used to do. And I ended up doing this learning development, and people loved what I did. And they said, Graham, how can we get more of you? And that's where A Guy I Know was founded, was literally, well, there's a guy I know who can help you. And then I set up my own offshore team to scale my capability. So that was 5 years ago. Fast forward to now, we've got 40 staff in the Philippines, and we've got 5 staff here in Australia and 1 in the UK. And they're all following the things that I did and learned over the last 5 years. And yeah, so that's kind of the business itself. Brilliant. Personally, I also have juggle the wife, the 3 kids, and yeah, so the usual challenges everyone faces.
Brilliant. And with regards to A Guy I Know, what type of clients? So you actually have clients across Australia, but what type of clients do you generally work with?
So primarily they have been larger clients. So the South 32s, the Synergies, the Water Corporation, the Relationships Australia, Coles Supermarket, that was our most recent. We generally will do a big piece of work for a client, and then they will come back to us regularly for kind of smaller bits of work. That's normally the model we have. One of the things that we're starting 2021 now is we're actually wanting to extend our capability and make it accessible to small and medium businesses. And that's a big driver for us. So what we deliver is awesome learning at an affordable, affordable amount. And then the idea is to make that more accessible now to kind of small, medium businesses. So.
Excellent. And in this particular case study, the client is a national supermarket chain, and they're implementing a HR system to manage staff. Generally speaking, you would work with the change management team, is that correct?
Yeah, so normally what happens when any large software deployment, they will have a change team in there, and then what that change team needs to create awesome kind of messaging and then also design the training. And so that's really where we come in. So then they bring in a learning expert to then build that content. And often it's done on a contractor basis. So they would come in and bring me in to do that. And that's kind of what happened with this Coles scenario. And it was quite interesting. So they had 12 change managers. When we joined, they had 12 change managers for this large software rollout. And you're there going, oh my goodness, 12. And they had decided that they wanted 1 training content developer and 1 training lead, and the training lead would spend 50% of the time helping create training content. And we're just there, and I joined that call thinking, I think you're going to need a few more training resources, but you have to choose your time when to mention that and raise it. First of all, you have to, and this is where my business training comes in as well. You don't come in and say that. You come in and, okay, you understand that and take them on that journey of it's showing them why they need these additional resources.
Excellent. And in terms of the actual platform that the supermarket is implementing, it's actually going to be a self-service platform. So staff will be able to access all of their details, complete training and development. And it takes them, if I'm right, all the way from when they're first recruited, right the way through to when they eventually move on from the business.
That's it. And so there's a number of solutions, HRIS, HR information, human resource information systems, that a lot of these large companies are now implementing. One of the leading ones is SAP SuccessFactors. And so what they will do is they will put in this HRIS system that takes from hire to retire. That's the nice kind of change management speak that we use in our scripting. But it's exactly that. And it's all about self-service. So whereas the HR function used to, you needed a letter to say what your current pay is, or, or you end of the year, you need that tax document, or all of that information that you would go to your HR department and say, I need this. This is, well, actually, you don't need to do that now. It's all self-service. We've implemented this system, and now you can go on your computer or your mobile phone and you can go leave balance, or what is my current pay rate? What bonus am I getting? And it's all in there, and also the learning as well.
Excellent. So, and obviously they would have, and they all have different levels of engagement with the platform. So a supervisor or a manager, for example, would have different levels of access to be able to manage their team.
Yeah, exactly that. So even if I talk from a recruitment process, for example, as a employee, I might want to go onto this careers tile and see what are all the available careers and apply for it. Then, but from a line manager perspective, I might have a head count that I want to fill, and so I can go into my organization chart that is a view just that I can see, which is on head count, and I can go, I want to fill that role. And then that kicks off that recruitment process, which then goes to their senior manager perhaps to approve, that then goes to a recruiter, to an administrator to assign it to a recruiter, that then goes to a recruiter who then advertise it, and then they'll get candidates that then will then automatically, when there are successful candidates that are shortlisted, that can go back to that hiring manager to then approve. And so it manages that whole end-to-end process. And from the user perspective, it's, oh, I need to do something within that process. So it is very much the user experience is based on their role and the permissions of what they're allowed to do.
Brilliant. And with regards to your work as well, it was and where a guy I know came in, it was also around the training staff on how to actually use the system.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was our third project of this sort of type, and it was all during COVID. So we literally got employed just when COVID was kicking off in March time. I was brought in, and it is all about, in about 4 or 5 months, they are rolling out this new piece of software. So what messaging do they need to give to people beforehand? What do you need to know before it goes live? Once it, just before, when it is just at that critical time before it's going live, what do you need to know? And then once it is live, what do I need support with? So all of our content needs to be designed to take them on that journey and ensure, one, they've got the confidence to know what to do. They wouldn't have a system to do it. So we need to train them. This is how to use a system, but you don't have access to it yet. And then after it, well, here's all the training content that you haven't remembered from the training, but you remember bits of it. And this is how to actually do it. So all the content we needed to create needed to kind of satisfy that journey that every user would undergo.
Brilliant. And because every user was doing it, you had to track to make sure that they had actually completed that training for sort of just for purposes of ensuring that that was delivered so that staff could do their job.
Yeah, that's always an interesting one. There's I always kind of call it the tick list in terms of companies. When I talk about learning, I think about the content and then how you manage it and then how you measure it. And it's how you manage it and measure it where that comes in, that engagement. And when you're doing the engagement of this sort of thing, how important is it? Well, managers want to know that everyone's completed it, tick. But the reality is it's a system that the user doesn't really care. They're busy doing their day-to-day job. They've got so much going on. They will do it just when they need to do it. And they need to know where to get the information to help them do the job. So my opinion, that's the reality. But you also have then the management who want to have this reassurance that 100 people have done, 100% of the people have done the training. And from experience, you know that they're not going to remember it. Who cares? All you've done is you've got this tick list, but the reality is they need to have it when they're doing it. And that deployment was not something that we really had much control over, because the client, who was Coles Supermarket, they already had this management tool, their learning management system, an LRS. They already had this platform to have their content on. So all content we designed had to try and fit in what was already established. And in these sort of projects, you don't say, hey, we're going to implement another tool to help you, because the business is used to rolling out content and training. So we normally have to adjust our content to ensure it aligns to the platforms they have.
Excellent. So it's obviously significantly more than just what years ago you would just have a user guide.
And ironically, ironically, we had requests for that. So we just want a user manual, and it's like, okay. So, and the challenges of a user manual is, one, it gets outdated very, very quickly. Two, the level and complexity of it. It's, you're putting all your information into a single Word document. And then really what happens is when what you see is they're always sitting on that bookshelf that no one ever uses. First of all, no one prints stuff out these days anyway. If they do print it out, it becomes out of date and no one opens it, but it's just a reassurance thing. So that traditional model has changed very much to bite-sized content that is digestible, that gives them, almost builds on layers of knowledge. So first of all, you kind of reassure them that it's going to be okay, and this is the new way, isn't it great? You give them a kind of a taster, this is the sort of stuff that you can do, I'm not going to tell you everything. They then kind of, once it's live, they've done enough training that, okay, I'm pretty confident I know what's going to happen. And then it's, once they're live, here is all this collateral that you have access to, that actually, you need to be able to find and help you do the task that you're doing at this point.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. So much more helpful. Moving on to the task questions. Our first question is, what are the stages required to work with a supermarket client in the process of building the user training package? And I know you mentioned the initial consultation and working and active listening. How else would you move on beyond that initial listening to what the client wants?
So normally what the classic thing is a TNA, training needs analysis. So, what you need to do is to do a TNA and output a training strategy, which I hate doing. It's one of those things. I'd like to design the content and develop the content and learn new stuff. So that bit's always the challenge for me in projects. But it is about going out and training needs analysis. I've seen lots of different formats, but really all you're doing is you're identifying the audience, you're identifying the gap that often comes from the change impact assessments that those change managers do. And then you're identifying the how, in terms of what are the platforms that you're going to be using to roll out that training. And then you kind of say the what and put in the when. So it is all the kind of the W's for a training needs analysis. So what we do is we do that analysis, huge spreadsheets. Having done these sort of projects before, I kind of know, I've got war stories, I know what worked well. And then we give them that, here is your strategy, here is the plan of what we're going to deliver, and then let us go, and we just go and do it. So kind of upfront, we do that training needs analysis and strategy. We then come to a plan, which is how we're going to develop the content. As part of that plan, we then have to have that review, how are we going to get it signed off, and then how you also go, and then it's been kind of a deployment. And sometimes we're involved in the deployment. These days, in this day and age, we're a lot less involved in the deployment. We're more about, we put the content in the right place, and it's all about self-service learning.
Yeah. Awesome. And our second question about the information required, I guess once you've done that training needs analysis, and you mentioned earlier as well about the 3 stages of what do they need to know before, what do they need to know during, and then the sort of once it's implemented. in terms of being able to go back to it. What specific information do you require from the change management consultants to determine the system and user documentation requirements?
So it's at that point we kind of step away. So the change management give us that input for that TNA as to, we know about the audience, this is what works well, these are the high level changes, but then that technical detail, we then need to speak to the subject matter experts. And it's at that point we kind of say goodbye to the change managers. They still want to be involved, but really we then have, we do technical sessions like this. It can be anything for an hour, or it can be multiple for up, 3 sessions of an hour. We record it, and what we do is we get the technical expert to walk us through the system end to end, because it's all about changing the process. So when you put in a piece of software, a lot of the things that the businesses get wrong is we put in a piece of software, therefore we've made all of these cost savings. Well, no, actually what you're doing is you're taking a as-is process, what is currently there, and you've got a to-be process. And what you need to do is you need to ensure on that to-be process it's more efficient, and also how to use the software in that to-be process. So what we do is we get that subject matter expert to walk us through the end-to-end process using the new tool. So for example, recruitment, they would walk us through that end-to-end process. They wouldn't say, let me show you the user experience, the employee experience. Let me show you the recruiter experience. What we do is we say, well, walk us through the end-to-end. And as they do that, they impersonate each user. And so they walk us through the end-to-end process. We capture all of that in for recruitment, let's say it be 3 1-hour sessions. And then we record it, and then we take that, and then it's up to us to then go, that's the user bit, that's the recruiter bit, and that's how we're going to create training content for them based on the amount of information we get given and the depth of that information. And that's the capturing of the information that we get. We shy away from people going, here, I've got this technical document to give you. We literally go, awesome, can you speak us through it? Because if you think of how you learn, the majority of people are more about show me, let me, I want to do it. There is a very small percentage who are, I absorb a manual and then I know it. But that number is very small. So we kind of, yeah. And if someone gives you a document, if I give you a 50-page document here and now, and I go, can you just create a 10-minute e-learning on that? You don't know what's important in the document, because the document doesn't prioritize what you need to know. And, so that's kind of where when people are speaking it, they tell you what you need to know. You might miss a few things, but you also bring up to the top the stuff the learner needs to know. And it's where that detailed level, that is where those kind of reference manuals come in, which we don't create, because that's really the subject matter expert's job to do.
Yeah, excellent. And in terms of, so obviously you've established all the information that you need, and you've created the training. In what ways do you deliver the training digitally to support? So you've mentioned that a lot of people do learn by show me. And how do you achieve that digitally to achieve the learning outcomes for the supermarket?
So when I talked as well about kind of there's 3 ways. There's the content, there's how you manage it, and then how you measure it. So really it's how you manage it determines what our limitations are for deploying that. So in this scenario, this tool, SAP SuccessFactors, they have context sensitive help. What that means is the application has a little icon at the top that when they clicked on it, depending where they were in the application, it would serve up learning content. So what we did was we developed lots of content, lots of bite-sized things, and then we just needed to put it in the right place. And that was kind of a really powerful tool. And so for us, it's about identifying what's the individual objects and at what point do they need it, and then what's the platform that can deploy it. Alongside that, though, in this scenario, they had 120,000 end users, but they only had 20,000 licenses for this in-app help. And that's because the in-app help was for the more complex tasks. Out of the 100,000 users were just self-service. I just want to check my leave and things like that. So what we then did was we then also rolled out online learning, e-learning that was on there. They had an LRS, not an LMS. An LMS is a learning management system a lot of companies have. An LRS is a learning record system, which is kind of like an LMS, but on steroids, and it's got a lot more data about it. So we put a lot of e-learning on the LRS that was assigned to the learners, and that was SCORM-based bite-sized learning of between 5 and 15 minutes, depending on the topics. We then also had a shed loads of animations that we'd done, but we'd use in the e-learning, we'd use them at context-sensitive help. So we put those on their platform. They had an internal video platform. They used Vimeo, but the learners didn't know it was Vimeo, so they had this video platform. And then, like most large organizations they had Microsoft Office, so they had SharePoint. SharePoint, this amazing thing that is, everyone seems to have, squirrels array information and is scary but awesome at the same time. So we then kind of put stuff on there, and then they had their own internal intranet that pointed people to different places. So when we do put our content somewhere, it is really important where the master version goes, and you don't have it in multiple places. So a classic example is the videos I mentioned. So if I fast forward to 3 months' time, Coles Supermarket come back to us and say, this process has changed, this animation has changed. The way we build our learning is very bite-sized, but that animation could actually be in an e-learning course as well. It could be on that context-sensitive help. So the very important thing is that everything that references that video needs to go to the master. Yeah. Because then when we update the master, it updates automatically everywhere. And that's often lost in people. So one of the things that we were very careful of is identifying with Coles, where are your master versions, and how do we embed those master versions in all the derivatives of what we create? So therefore it's really easy to update. And that's part of a design you think about the maintenance.
A bit like when you do a formula in a cell, you always use the cell reference and not the actual formula or the sum.
Exactly that. It is exactly that. A great analogy.
Yeah, brilliant. And any other, so this is software obviously for sharing. In terms of when you actually create, because we've obviously sent out the amazing version that you created of the case study just to show the difference in terms of what you can create. And I love the branding and how it appears and how you've completely sort of moved around and color branded the case study, which I think looks amazing. What types of software do you use to create all of your materials and record your animations?
So we use a blend of tools. So one of the things that we do is, so the Adobe suites, so we use InDesign, we use Illustrator and Photoshop to do some of the visual things. PowerPoint, would you believe? So PowerPoint is amazing, and we do a lot of our quick reference guides in PowerPoint. People are like, no, we use Word. But Word is all about words. PowerPoint is about visual. And when we create, we always believe that it's about contrast. It's about not having, repetitive to a certain extent. It's got to be pleasing to the eye. So it needs to be a learning tool that a learning thing that I want to look at. I want to read the who. So I look at the case study now, the who, the where, I can see it. And then I've got a separate section that's task. So I might jump into that. So that sort of stuff can be created in PowerPoint so easily. And we create our quick reference guides in PowerPoint. And the reason for that is it's all about ongoing maintenance. So we can come in and create this awesome learning, but how is the client going to update it moving forward? They're not going to keep coming to us. We don't want to keep updating it as well. So by using PowerPoint for certain things, and the design capability of PowerPoint is awesome. So anyway, so that's a plug for PowerPoint. And then so in terms of the e-learning that we develop, we use the Articulate suite wherever possible. Articulate is awesome. It allows you to create mobile-friendly learning. They've got a light product called Rise, which is phenomenal, which I push all clients towards. And then that allows you to output this thing called a SCORM package that goes on all learning management systems. And then for animations, we use Adobe After Effects. But there are other third-party tools that you can use that I used in my early days before I had those skills, where you can create. So it used to be called Go Animate. It's now called Beyond. There's VideoScribe. There's these video platforms that allow you to create videos. I think for me, the most important thing is whenever you do it, if you think about someone going through a 10-minute thing, it just needs to have different types. You need to keep mixing it up, switching it up. But yeah, so you can create a lot of awesome stuff on a budget using a lot of kind of cheap tools. And that's how I started, a guy I know. And the Adobe licenses are also very reasonable as well. Student licenses are very, very reasonable. So yeah.
Brilliant. That's excellent. And in terms of, so when you're rolling out the training, what would you say are the main challenges that are faced?
Changes of content. So we, the scenario was, if the traditional projects used to be waterfall, which basically means you have your strategy, you then have your scope, you then do your high level design, you then do your detailed level design, you then do your implementation, and then you do your testing, and then you roll out. Now everyone's agile. What that means is chaos. And it means that what you're doing is you're doing lots of changes in many sprints. So they don't really know the end state. They roughly know what it is, and these are the sprints we're going to do. And then we're going to, and software is so easy to adapt and change. So what will happen is we will capture that information from that expert, and then we'll develop the learning over a period of a month. And at the end of that month, oh no, this bit's changed. Okay. And it's, and so, we're going live in a week's time, and they're changing a fundamental bit, but we need to then update all the training material and redeploy it. So that's a big challenge. Another challenge is timelines get so compressed, and people don't appreciate the effort it is to create training content and good training content. And so what they'll basically do is they'll assign, well, we've got testing here. My favorite question is, well, we'd really like the training for the testers. So I'm like, hold on, you've just finished the design of your system, you've just built it. So you've only just finished, you're now going into testing, and you want in that 48-hour period for us to develop all of the training content to train your testers on how to use it. And in your testing period, it's all going to change anyway, because you're going to fail lots of tests and realize what doesn't work. And so, yeah, so the challenge is, another challenge is the lack of understanding of how long it takes to design good learning content. We've come up with practices to overcome that. So we've moved very agile, very flexible, very, with how we design our learning. That training of those testers, well, I mentioned we have different levels of training. So if we create that high level messaging and the high level process, generally high level processes don't change too much. It's the detail that changes. So therefore we put the detail in that quick reference guide, and we keep the e-learning at a high enough level that it's unlikely to change. So in our design, we try and put the different levels to minimize that impact. But I suppose that those were the biggest challenges is updates to content, lack of appreciation of how long things take to change. And yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that lack of understanding is something that it's obviously going to need something like an industry focused awareness raising, really. And just, yeah, I mean, I know that I've personally got lost in Canva sometimes over an hour, desperately trying to create something that looks good and failing miserably, and realizing that hour of my time could have been so better spent somewhere else. So, even with somebody with the right skills, you're still having to spend the time to set up and get it right, and get the right sort of spacing and structure and content and layout. So, it's about that appreciation, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so it's a lot of challenges, but it's a lot of fun. And then everyone forgets anyway, and kind of, it's one of the big interesting things as well is, they spend millions on these projects, and then they spend very little on that training and that upskill and that enablement of someone. And it is where these projects fail continually. Is, you know, you've put all of that effort in the build and stuff, which is great, well done, but if people don't use it, are you going to get that financial benefit if they're not using it correctly? You know, so
That
that's the
return on
scary thing.
investment. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a very difficult thing to measure.
Yes.
How so I mentioned about that tick list. So I these people have done that training, but have they understood it? Do they know how to do their job? Do they, is it useful? Is it good training? You know, and it's such a wishy-washy thing to measure. One of the best quotes from the Coles learning though was, we did that e-learning stuff before everyone had to do it, and one of the very senior managers said that the e-learning is like my sugar. I can't get enough. And the other comments were, you know, what's the best part of a project? So the entire project, the deployment, you know, was the e-learnings. And for us, that was literally like, wow, that's awesome. You know, out of everything you could have chosen, that, you know, so yeah, so it was great.
Excellent. So it's so rewarding as well to know that you've had that impact and helped people, which is fantastic. And in terms of one final question, which is not within our task questions, but is really important to know. When you're recruiting a new member of staff to work with you, what are the key things that you look for in that individual to be able to do this type of work effectively?
Attitude. The ability to so I'm not sure if that's kind of really what you wanted, but so we're funny beasts are us learning people and consultants, in that we learn a set of tools and that's how we do it. And then when we go to a client, we basically go, well, I know how to do these two tools and I'm an expert in them. So when the client says, what learning are you going to do? You're going to go, I'm going to do these two things because it's going to be, this is, you know, whereas one of the things I did was when I had to roll up my sleeves and learn, you know, I basically went, well, what are all the different things that we can do? And we're always looking at what other people are doing in a good way in terms of, you know, how can we make it engaging? And it's about having, so when looking for someone, it's that openness to learn something. So a thirst for learning, a thirst for getting upskilled on something, and then how they can apply that. And really comes down to their attitude. Design is something that can be taught. Yes, you get those designers who are amazing and those designers who are just, they'll only ever get to a certain level. Is what I've seen. But nevertheless, even the ones who will get to that certain level, that's still good enough. You know, it's just learning design principles. So some things I think can't necessarily be taught.
And these are the messages that are really important, because I think IDMT and, you know, like you say, design, there are areas that you do need a certain level of technical ability, but in order to succeed effectively within an organization or a business, you definitely need to have that work ethic and that attitude and that mindset, which is going to set you apart from other people.
I think the things that, and I didn't get this as well until I started running my business, was what you don't really appreciate is, as that resource, you need to bring in enough money to pay for yourself. So if you spend a day delivering this amazing quick reference guide that's absolutely beautiful, but the client needs 8, and actually maybe we could have done something that was good enough, you know, and it's understanding that that's okay. And so as the person who's spent the whole day doing it, it is also up to the person who's mentoring them to help them understand that, take them on that journey, positive reinforcement. That's really good. How can we make that so we can do more of them, or we could have templates? So a classic one is our characters. So in Coles, for example, we at cost to ourselves go in and we create a style guide for learning, because this then allows us to say, this is what it's all going to be looking like moving forward. We get that signed off, but we also create a character kit. That character kit, we invest the time of creating it. It was a 30 slide deck. No, there's about an 80 slide deck. So 80 slides with three slides per character, all in different poses. So therefore there'd be about 15 poses of every character all across the business. And it meant that once we got that signed off as well, that early investment meant that for creating out and churning this content, we literally went, this character done, that character there. So we could really churn out our work. And if you remember what I was talking about for our timelines, in the early stages, we don't really have the detail, but at the very end, we have the detail and they go, can you do it in that 48 hours? Because we've done all that pre-work and that, and we're ready and we've done, 80%, we can then really get that detail. Detail and looks good. So I hope that makes sense. But
brilliant. So the structure of your work is really important, and that again, that's a really good lesson for students to learn as well. Is working out how you're going to do it, and like you say, your clients' needs, the order in which things happen, and that's something that processes and systems again are really important part of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
Brilliant. That's awesome. Well, we've actually reached the end of the discussion now, and I'd just like to thank you so much for sharing the supermarket example with us and enabling our teachers to really understand the nature of how a real project works from start to finish, the software, the challenges, and everything else that's involved. So thanks so much for your time. It's very much appreciated. And should anybody from any school that are interested in, so if there's any schools that are looking to update their systems or look at learning management systems, what's the best way for someone to reach you?
So LinkedIn is the best way always. So find me on LinkedIn, just connect. Anyone who, hey, I believe in always helping and always doing as much as I can. And I always give away my advice and experience for free because I found that, one, I like doing that. And two, it comes back to you tenfold. It might not be with that person, but it will be through other people. And that's how myself and you met. I think I was somebody else you did a case study for. I helped them. COVID happened. They said, Graham, we need to create all of our online learning. And I went, you can use us and I'm going to charge you money, but you're a small business and you don't really have that money, but let me just tell you how to do it yourself. And this person was very grateful. And I walked into a conference where I didn't know anyone. I thought, oh God. And I was there feeling apprehensive, and suddenly, Graham, this person ran over, gave me a hug, and that's how I met you. And that's how this happened. So you never know where things happen, and just help people.
Fantastic.
So to answer your simple question, yes, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn and just connect.
Brilliant, lovely. And it's Graham Hall. And a guy.
Graham Hall, H-A-L-L, a guy I know. You can also like our business, yay. You can like all the stuff that we stuck on there and just say positive stuff about us. And that just all helps as well. But hey,
excellent.
Just enjoy.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much.
No worries at all.